Well, I had a suggestion that was given to me last week, and I thought, sure, let's talk about that. I'm always open to suggestions. If you never make them, then I'm sorry, your topic doesn't get discussed. But it's a sure way to get your topic discussed. So what was suggested is, why don't we talk a little bit about heaven and hell, because it's just the person said there's a lot of different ideas that people have, and I thought, sure, I can clear all that up. So my first comment is, no, I'm not going to clear all that up. I can give some ways to think about it, and then you can decide for yourself, well, how do we think then about heaven and hell? Because it's not nearly as clear as it was when it was presented to me growing up in church. It was just very clear. There wasn't anything to sort out about it. It was what it was, and we all knew that. So my attempt this morning to have a discussion on this may just muddy the waters. We'll see, right? I thought I would start with a simple observation. I looked at the translation I use, which is New American Standard most of the time, and so I just did a simple search. And how many times does heaven show up in the New Testament? 257 times. How many times does hell show up in the New Testament? Anyone has it a guess?
3.
It's shockingly low compared to how much we talked about it growing up in church.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up 13 times. Mm-hmm. And if you remove the duplicates, like in the Gospels, where it's showing up 4 times just because one Gospel is including what the other Gospel said. So if you look at the unique instances of hell in the New Testament, there are 9. 9 occasions. So, like I said, as much as I grew up hearing about it, I would have thought it must be on every page, because we talked about it all the time. Like, everyone must talk about this. So here's the reality. It shows up 9 times, and all of those basically are Jesus. There's one time that James uses it, and he uses it about the tongue. The tongue is like this unruly thing, and it could be set on fire by the fires of hell. So he makes an allusion to it, right? The other time it shows up in English that's not Jesus, is in 2 Peter, and it's a different word, but most English Bibles will render it hell. And it's a Persian word, and in Persian religion there was a place that was because Persians had some of these same ideas, that evil angels would be cast, Tartarus. And 2 Peter uses that word, and most English Bibles will render that as hell. But that's a unique occurrence. So 9 total times, once in James, once a different word in Peter, the other 7 are Jesus. Paul never uses the word. John never uses the word. It's not in the Gospel of John, not in Revelation, not in his 3 letters, right? So it's really a term that Jesus uses. And the term is Gehenna. That's the word that Jesus uses, and that is translated in our New Testaments as hell. Even the one in James, the one time in James, so 7 times with Jesus, unique times. Once in James, that's the word Gehenna, and then once in Peter, and that's not the word Gehenna, right? So, and so this is just some of the kind of the facts, so we know what we're talking about, right? The word Gehenna refers to a valley of Hinnom. It refers to the valley of Hinnom, which is a valley outside Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is built on a mountain, Mount Zion, and it's surrounded, like one of the hills surrounding it is the Mount of Olives, right? And so from Jerusalem to these, like to the Mount of Olives, you have to go through the Kidron Valley, I think it is, right? But one of the other valleys around Jerusalem is the Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna. And pre-Jewish time, when it was a Canaanite, when it was a Jebusite city, they worshiped the god Molech, and one of those places of worship was that valley, and they actually sacrificed children. So it was a place of human sacrifice. So when David conquers Jerusalem and takes it from the Jebusites and makes it his capital, I mean, what are you going to do with the Valley of Hinnom, right? This place of pagan ritual and human sacrifice, cursed. What do we do with it? They turn it into the garbage dump. It's the city dump. Because nobody can use it for any sort of, you're not going to build a house in the Valley of Hinnom, So they turn it into the garbage dump. And so all the garbage is thrown into that valley outside the city, including carcasses of animals and such. So there's all kinds of refuse there. So when Jesus talks about Gehenna, and when he talks about where the worm does not die and the fires never go out, he's talking about dump, where there's always maggots and there's always smoldering fire from setting that trash alight. So for Jesus to say Gehenna, he's talking about a place that all Jewish people know, and it's got a history. It's a cursed place, and it's a place of pagan human sacrifice. And now it's the city dump, and there's always smoldering fires, and there's always maggots because there's all this decaying refuse, right? That's the word that we in English render as hell, right? And Jesus talks about it 7 times. The other word, which maybe in the King James would sometimes be translated hell, but no longer in English translations, is the word Hades. And that occurs 11 times. Hades is a Greek word, and it's much more like the Jewish concept of Sheol in the Old Testament. As far as Jews during the Old Testament period were concerned, everyone who died went down to Sheol, good and bad alike. It was the place of the dead. Everyone. It's not just where the bad people, it's where everybody goes. Because, and we're probably familiar with the idea that the Jews didn't have a strongly developed understanding of an afterlife. For Jews, the blessedness was in this life. If you could live a long life and see your children's children and die in an old age and be gathered to your ancestors, that was grand, right? That was it. And then you went to Sheol. And it's not like, they're not asking the question, is there existence after death? You just exist in Sheol. It's not like they're saying you don't exist. But there was a dispute by Jesus' day, was there ever a resurrection? Like, could you come back to the land of the living, or did you just forever remain in this realm of the dead? That's the Greek word for that same thing is Hades. The Egyptians had the same idea. They had a god who reigned over the netherworld. That was Osiris, the god of the dead. So many old ancient cultures had those concepts, right? Some sort of realm of the dead where everyone goes. That was a Jewish idea. That's the idea of Hades. Okay. Those are just kind of facts, right? And literally, factually, what the word for heaven is sky, right? It's sky.
Oh.
It's that. So when we read in the Psalms, the heavens declare the glory of God, it's their word for the sky. It's what's up above us, where the sun, moon, stars, and the clouds are, and ancient peoples didn't know what they were looking at. They figured they're looking. Most of them in the ancient world thought they were looking at the underside of a brass dome that covered the earth, and they thought that's what they were looking at. They were like living under a bowl. That's why in Genesis if literally it'll talk about opening the floodgates of heaven. So they believed there could be water above that bowl, and there were portals in the bowl, and when those opened, that's what rain was, the water falling down on us from up above this bowl. Most of the time the bowl holds it up, but when the gates open, the water comes down. Perfectly reasonable if you're living 5,000 years ago, right? Who knows? We just think we're looking at a bowl and the mostly water up there somewhere that occasionally comes down on us, right? And they called all of that the sky, the heavens, right? So those are our two words. We talk about heaven and hell. We're talking about the sky and some sort of netherworld. And having that idea of both Hades, the realm of the dead, or what Jesus would talk about, Gehenna. Now that's kind of the basic facts, as I see them, of what the words are and the concept. Now, how do we understand it? How do we read that for ourselves? The idea that I was taught growing up is that heaven and hell were basically a concern for what happens after this life is over. Right? That what I was taught was you're going to spend all eternity in one place or the other. These were your two options. And you need to be careful to get the good option, not the bad one. Right? Anyone else? I mean, I'm assuming that most of us, that's kind of the idea we were given. Yeah?
I'm surprised how few references there are, especially hell. But it seems like we have Dante to thank for what the modern world thinks of in literature as heaven and hell. Dante wrote, Inferno, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a description of some horrible place.
Yeah, and in the medieval period, kind of where that developed a lot of artwork, frescoes and paintings of demons torturing people and all this kind of, and so it was a very vivid sort of presentation in the Middle Ages to motivate people to do good, because this is what's going to happen to you, right? So some of that does come out of the Middle Ages. Let's look at, if Jesus is the one who out of the 9 times hell shows up in the New Testament, if he's 7 of them, let's just read when he's talking about it and see what he's saying. How about that? Sounds reasonable to me. But remember, we can easily read all the instances because there aren't that many. Paul never mentions it. John never mentions it, right? The Hebrew writer never mentions it. So if you think about it, in all the letters of Paul, he never writes to anyone about hell, right? And in the preaching in Acts, we have a series of sermons in Acts, the preaching of the early church. Most famous sermon being the first one on the day of Pentecost, right? But we've got a number of sermons. In all the preaching in Acts, nobody ever preaches about hell. That's interesting. That's not part of the early church's message. They're not going out telling people you're going to go to hell. That's not what they're telling people. Or if they were telling them, for some reason Luke didn't tell us what they were saying. He didn't record it. Okay, so let's look at them in Matthew. Like I said, there are some parallels in the other Gospels, but Matthew's got all 7 times that Jesus talks about it. So we're going to start in the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5:22. So Matthew 5:22, but I say to you that everyone who's angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell, to go into Gehenna. Therefore, now let's not just stop. Therefore, if you're presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. So there's the first instance in Matthew, who records all 7 times Jesus uses this word Gehenna. What do you notice is going on in Matthew 22, 23, 24? And I want to read what follows, because the therefore is, if 22 is the case, therefore do 23 and 24. Do you see that? Right? He sets out, this is the reality, so make sure you are sorting things out with whoever you know has something against you. Notice, it's not who you have something against, it's if someone has something against you in 23, right? Therefore, if you're presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, and I would assume that's maybe something legitimate, right? Like, oh yeah, I did him wrong. Okay. All right. So, well, let me dive. What's happening in 23? You're presenting your offering at the altar. What's that? What is that? Where are you?
Grace.
Temple.
Grace.
Okay, you're in the temple, right? You're in the temple because the synagogues don't have altars. What's the altar? This is a sacrifice, and the only place Jews offer sacrifices is in the temple. So you're in Jerusalem, you're in the temple. You may live up in Galilee, but you've gone for Passover or something all the way down to Jerusalem. You're going into the temple. You're going to make an offering. Now, there's lots of different kinds of offerings. It doesn't say what kind of offering. It could be a sin offering. Well, it might be a sin offering. Why? Because you remember your brother's got something against you. Now, it could be a peace offering, it could be a thank offering, it could be one of the other offerings. Do you see how it could be a sin offering? It's kind of like you're there to make an offering about what you did to your brother, but you've never sorted it out with your brother. Wouldn't that be ironic? I'm going to go make an offering because I know I screwed over Larry. Have you talked to Larry? No, I hadn't talked to him. How about you go sort it out with Larry, then come back and make your offering for how you wronged Larry? Wouldn't that make sense? See, that's what I think's going on. It's kind of like you're there to make an offering of what you know you did wrong, and you never made it right. It's like, what good is the offering of, Lord, forgive me for how I mistreated Larry, and you hadn't even talked with Larry? I think Jesus is saying that's pretty hypocritical, isn't it? Why don't you go sort things out with Larry first? Then you could come before God at the temple and say, forgive me for the way I did Larry wrong. The Lord says, have you sorted out? Yeah, I went and talked to him. I found out if I made restitution, I sorted that out, I've resolved it.
He might come with.
Huh?
He might join you at the temple.
Yeah, then Larry and I can be in fellowship in the temple because he's no longer angry at me because I wronged him, right? Let's just say that's what's happening, right? Are you following what I'm trying to describe, what I think's going on? Okay.
It does seem interesting, it's always seemed interesting to me, that it's not if I have something against my brother, but my brother has something against me.
Right. And I think that's because I'm the one making the offering. Like, I'm trying to make things, as it were, right with God.
Yeah.
And the question is, what's the point of making things right with God if I've not made it right with my brother? I mean, can I skip making it right with my brother and just talk to God about it, make it all okay, and then my brother's still over there unhappy because what I did to him? No, I can't do that. You got to go. I think what Jesus is saying, your offering is meaningless unless you've already addressed the issue.
Is mercy in this? Isn't that what this is about?
Yeah,
You're asking for mercy, you're asking for...
Yeah, I think that's the irony. I think it's irony. Jesus is saying you're going to the altar seeking the mercy of God, and yet have you tried to talk to the person if you know they're upset with you, and again, I'm assuming, and they've got good reason. It's not that they, took something completely innocuous and made a mountain out of it.
I know, forget the birthday.
Right. So, but yeah, the whole point of going to the altar is to participate in this ritual of forgiveness and mercy and cleansing. And again, I think Jesus is just saying, you can't do that if you've not tried to do some cleansing as best you can. Now, we know there are limits, and AA has lots of good advice about how to try and make amends, and when it's appropriate and when it's not. They always say, never make amends if it's going to make things worse. And you can make anonymous amends when appropriate. And so there are ways to actually, how do I do this? But I think that's what Jesus is talking about. But we're getting back to, this is the first time that he talks about hell, right? The context matters. If that's what's happening in 23 and 24, go talk to that person, then you can come back and really make your offering to God in an honest, truthful way, not in a hypocritical way. How then do we understand what 22 is talking about? Because that's where Gehenna is mentioned. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. What's he talking about? Any idea?
So when I was growing up, it was like if I told somebody they were a fool, I was going to go to hell.
Yeah, a very literal thing. Yeah, my brother and I, as children, had an argument about that, and my brother was telling me I couldn't, so I was just saying it, to be mean. Fool, fool, fool. He's like, you're going to go to hell. It's like, but that's what 7-year-olds do to their 9-year-old brother, is you torment them by being stubborn and because it's not going to be that way, I'll prove it to you. I'll say it. Yeah, it's not quite that. So what is Jesus saying? But that's a question. What is he saying? Is it something that literal, if that word is somehow a magic word that condemns you eternally? Or is there something else going on here, right?
It's like he says it 3 times to make a point.
But 3 different things he says, right. What were you going to say, John?
It just seems like there are layers of complexity to the resistance to showing mercy and seeking forgiveness. There's the first, which is the local court system. The second, which is the Sanhedrin. And if you're still being persnickety and persistent and refusing to seek forgiveness, that there's this extra layer of...
Yeah, it seems like in 22, it seemed like an ascending thing, right? The court, the Supreme Court, and then the garbage dump, right? And you're right. It's kind of a more local court. You try and, you're gonna there's an issue now. You've done this, but then there could be a bigger issue that's going to go to the Supreme Court, which again, the Supreme Court is not our Supreme Court. It's the Sanhedrin, the higher
Intimidating leaders.
Yeah, it goes to a higher group of elders, wise people who try and going to work this out. And you've been the one telling people they're fools and stuff, right? And so you say, you're angry with your brother. Now some manuscripts add, I think, without a cause, right? Because obviously some people copying these ancient manuscripts thought, but there's right reasons to be angry, and so they added the words without a cause, right?
Young's Literal has without cause.
Yeah, because that's based on certain Greek manuscripts. And I can understand why editors might have added that in when they're making copies, because they're thinking, surely it's not any anger, there's righteous anger. But yeah, it's kind of an increasing thing. You're angry with someone, that becomes an issue that's got to be resolved, right? It has to be taken to be mediated by somebody, a court, right? Because this is not traffic court or criminal court. This is more like the elders of the town trying to create peace and harmony. But then it goes more, you're not just you're angry, you're not good for anything, you're totally a worthless person. Well, you're doing that's going to be addressed at another level. So it's like hell here is a third level of addressing it, right? Because court level 1, court level 2, hell, Gehenna. It's in an increasing order of handling the problem, right? And so then we still have the question, well, what does hell then mean? Right?
But you think that as the church, we're supposed to be Christ, these things do matter in the way that the world looks at us and sees us with this kind of behavior. Don't you agree? I mean, it's still these kind of things are still a big deal.
Yeah, and Paul addresses it to the letter in Corinth, where the Corinthians have got matters going on between them, lawsuits, and they're taking them before just pagan courts, and Paul kind of reprimands them and says, isn't there someone smart enough among you to kind of handle this? You know, you're going before pagans to get justice or to work out this problem. Can't you just find someone among you who's wise and you trust and lay out the situation and abide by whatever that person or little group gives you? He's telling the church, hey, you're a community, handle your own problems. You don't have to go to pagans who don't even share your view of God and the world and the gospel, and you're getting them to give you solutions, you know. So if we're really living in community, guess what? There's going to be problems, right? Anybody had any problems trying to live in a community of a family or a larger group? Or, of course there's problems.
You have a conflict with somebody, and you're not accepting any responsibility for it. You're
Yeah.
just saying you're a fool or you're stupid, you know, rather than, you know, joining with them like, even though I didn't mean to do this, I have a part in it, you know,
Yeah, yeah, that, you know, the old saying, it takes two to tango, and AA encourages you to consider your own part in anything. Nothing is completely one-sided. Even if the other person, what they did was egregious, well, but I'm not perfect. I need to at least consider where was I at fault in being an imperfect person. Even if this was really something they did without, you know, cause or anything. But I gotta realize I've not been a perfect friend to them. Maybe they've been a real jerk to me, but I've not been a perfect friend either. And I gotta work on me and not worry about trying to work on them, right? All I can do is try and work on me. And I agree. That's where a kind of resolution, a reconciliation is possible. When we're able to come and talk with each other and say, well, I'll make amends for what I've done wrong.
If you've wronged somebody, I mean, the way human nature, it's funny, it hasn't changed in 2,000 years.
Of course not.
I can see where the Corinthians are like, well, I really don't want to apologize for this, so yeah, I'll take it to court and win my day in the Gentile court. And I can think of circumstances where the last thing you need to do is, you know, love your neighbor, which means the person that's you've wronged, and now I need to make amends for that. You know, no, I think I'm right. In fact, let's go to court
Yeah.
in the civilian world.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're after 12 and got to stop.
Second.
But we're obviously just starting this discussion. But what I want us to think about is we've started to kind of look at this. When he throws out Gehenna, is he talking about the afterlife and where you'll spend eternity? Or, I mean, what is he talking about? Because he's talking about solving things here and now. Do they get solved? Now, he could be saying, if you don't solve it here and now, boy, you're in trouble for eternity. But maybe he's not talking about that, right? Maybe he's talking about it can go to this court, it can go to that court, or it can go to this third extreme. And then what is he talking about, right? In other words, see what I'm saying? I tell you, the question, you know, I'm not going to be able to sort all this out for you. What I would hope is we see the complexity of it all and not have easy answers. Like, I know exactly what this means. No, it's not that easy, right? And so to kind of live with some of the, what is he talking about? Because we'll look at some more, but that's what we'll pick up next week.
Elijah.
Thanks for your attention.